But anyway, as you get older, I think that is pretty much the meaning of life. Just how well are you sleeping? And it's kind of a hack topic, and I hate all the fucking fitness influencer people who obsess over their sleep. But the older I get, the more I find that my happiness is essentially directly correlated to how much I sleep. It's pretty sad, to be honest.
I find that my best sleeps are also ridiculously short ones. I find myself a nice pillow or a comfy bed. Takes me hours to fall asleep. But I sit on the subway for 5 minutes and I'm out like a brick. I just fall asleep immediately. And I wish I had fuck all to do and I could just spend all of my time sitting in public transport because that's the best sleep I've ever had.
Yeah, maybe that's what bums do. They use the alcohol and drugs. Really, what they're really chasing, man, is just those 5-minute naps on the
Those 5 minute
subway.
naps. Look, I mean, not bums for other things, but their brain capacity is not one of them. They got great ideas.
Yeah, definitely. They're onto something for sure. All right, well, let's jump right in. Seeing as we're both tired and there's a lot to get through with this bad boy.
Let's do it.
So I'm pretty sure everyone's heard of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. But if you've been living under a rock, mate, I'll do a quick little synopsis. So Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was an international passenger flight operated by Malaysia Airlines that disappeared on March 8, 2014, while flying from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia to its planned destination, Beijing. The crew last communicated with air traffic control around 38 minutes after takeoff when the flight was over the South China Sea. The aircraft was lost from ATC radar screens minutes later, but was tracked by military radar for another hour, deviating westwards from its planned flight path, crossing the Malay Peninsula and Andaman Sea. So that's essentially the intro there. Cue days of mystery where it was just non-stop media coverage of where the fuck is this plane? And many mysteries remain to this day, just due to the kind of weird circumstance of the fucking incident. But yeah, I guess to kind of kick things off, Davey boy, do you recall what your initial reaction was back in the day when this story first broke?
I do, specifically because, to my recollection, this is the first time I truly became aware of exactly what 24-hour cable news was. I mean, before that, the news was on, it was in the background, but it was the first time that I saw one story for months on end just get pounded into the ground with speculation and a bunch of clueless anchors like trying to make something out of nothing. I mean, it's an incredible story. A plane fucking disappeared and no one knew why. However, they have the same amount of information we had, and to watch these news anchors just struggling to make content out of nothing over and over is kind of what woke me up to what a mistake 24 hours news is. Because I guess in the pre-Trump days, this is going to sound stupid, but there isn't always something happening. And sometimes when there's nothing happening, they'll just attach themselves to that one thing that is interesting and really, really hit you over the head with it. And I remember initially being shocked because planes are inherently scary. Traveling by plane is an inherently terrifying thing as is. And the last thing you want to hear is terrible plane crash or plane disappears over the ocean, plane hijacked. Because even if it's a 1 in a billion thing, it's impossible not to think about. And this is, I think to this day, the most covered and the most widespread and mysterious plane disappearance we've had.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, my initial reaction was essentially the same. I recall being in a New York City subway station a couple days after the incident. And I don't think it was a television. I believe it was like a newspaper, the little stores they have down there where you can buy gum and a pack of smokes and a newspaper, and there was like the headline like Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 still missing. And I just remember, I'm not sure if I was feeling particularly insular at that point in time, but I was just like, I could not give a fuck about this. Because I was already beaten. I didn't have a TV in my home, but I already felt suffocated by the story, just because I guess online was the same. You couldn't escape the story, and no one had more information. And so I have a distinct memory of seeing the headline and being like, I couldn't give a fuck what happened to these people. And it really took me like 5 or so years to come around and be like, whoa, that was insane. And it kind of had a delayed reaction with me, because I was just so knee-jerk reaction was to be just be like, I'm not getting involved in this game, because it's going to suck up so much of my attention and time and be so unrewarding to sit around and watch news anchors pull out more graphs and visualizations of where they think the fucking thing went. But crazy story nonetheless.
Yeah, it's not to sound dismissive of the story. The story itself is remarkable, and it's one of those things where you're no closer to solving it. You open one link that you hope gives you the answer, and then it just poses 20 more questions. All the frustration I have comes purely from the news coverage. And this is the first time I became aware of who Don Lemon of CNN is. I don't know if you know who that guy is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
He's an entertaining guy, and people shit on him enough. I'm not going to call him an idiot, but I will say he kind of perfectly represents like this modern reporter. They don't report anything. They just do endless speculation. And I remember he asked on air if it's possible that a black hole swallowed the plane up, and people gave him shit for that. But at the same time, I'm thinking, why the fuck not? You don't have a better answer. All these people are coming up with stuff. At least he said something entertaining. I mean, it might be fucking stupid.
That's almost that's something we'd say on this podcast. Maybe that was their kind of like they're dipping the toes, network news into podcasting, where they're just like, they went full Joe Rogan, just like, dude, do you think Bigfoot did it? They just said like, we've got hours to fill, just fucking go crazy, Lemon, say whatever the fuck you want.
In that case, he should apologize to Joe Rogan, because I mean, Joe Rogan deserves mockery. He's a clown, and this is someone who listens to his podcast, but he does say really stupid shit. However, in the past year, CNN has gone above and beyond to really demonize him in some ways that are fair, some not so much. And even when he called them out on some things that they were flat out wrong about, they've just doubled down and never admitted it. But yeah, I appreciate Don Lemon for those Joe Rogan-esque comments.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, it is kind of that there are the occasional, with things like the Will Smith slap, which I'm thinking we could potentially dig into as like what would be the cinematic version of that whole fiasco, but that's for another episode. But the media coverage or the kind of confusion that happens after something like that, when the news where it should be reporting on the Russia-Ukraine war then has to kind of like dig into the fact that one entertainer slapped another entertainer at the Oscars, because in moments like that, that is all that people are thinking about. There are these kind of zeitgeisty moments in time where it's all about 9/11 or the missing Malaysia Airlines flight or the Will Smith slap. Sometimes you can obsess on a story for weeks. Sometimes it's only a few hours, but it's almost, in their defense, it is almost futile for them to go to something else, because then it's like, well, how the fuck can I take my mind off the elephant in the room? So yeah, maybe that's CNN's whole beef with Joe Rogan, is like, we kind of stole your format or gave you the idea for your format, and that's why we're beefing. But anyway, so it took me a few years to kind of give a shit or understand the magnitude of this because of my knee-jerk reaction. And when I was back in Australia a few years ago, I asked, there was these two dudes actually who were both interested in aviation. I was having beers with them, and I was like, what happened there? And they were both just immediately like, oh, murder, suicide. It was obvious to them because they'd obviously paid attention when the story broke and followed up. So that kind of leads me to this Medium article. It's written by someone called Admiral Cloudberg, which is a great name if you write on Medium. Yeah. And the title of the article is called Call of the Void, 7 years on. What do we know about the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370? And it's a long read. It's 42 minutes, but it's well worth your time. It's just it kind of lays everything out very clearly and kind of goes into all the different possible explanations and exactly what happened. But to kind of condense it down, initially there was lots of confusion because the air traffic controllers in Malaysia noticed that this plane had deviated slightly from its intended route up to Beijing, but they kind of thought it was the Vietnamese, like a Vietnamese issue, and then the Vietnamese thought it was a Malaysian issue. So there were lots of fuck-ups from air traffic control, the technical people on the ground initially, and then instead of just heading essentially due north, what the pilot did was take like a hard left, and then from there he was able to kind of essentially cut all the he as soon as he possibly could, he cut all the tracking on the aircraft. And for the longest time, all the kind of investigators thought he'd done everything he possibly could to be untrackable. And then obviously the plane was missing. They didn't know where it was, but because they initially they didn't know where the fuck it was initially, and like they literally could have gone in any direction. But then I think it was some people in it might have been Perth, I don't recall, but somewhere in Australia, they figured out that there was this like additional beacon hidden on the plane where it like every so often beeped, and then from the beep they could kind of tell, they kind of triangulated the distance, and so really clever fucking people that figured this out were able to kind of identify that either the plane went kind of like northwest up into mainland Eurasia, or it kind of went southwest down into the depths of the Indian Ocean, essentially towards Antarctica. So that's essentially what these clever fuckers figured out from this kind of like hidden tracking beacon on the aircraft. And then a few months later, they started finding debris in the Indian Ocean, and just the whole in the article, the Medium article, they go into how that one company were like, yeah, we'll pay for the search. We don't find it. They were just super confident that they were going to figure out where it was, and they weren't able to find the wreckage. But bits and pieces started, kind of showing up in the Indian Ocean. I think over towards, Reunion is one of the islands, which is off the coast of Africa. I think near Madagascar, or maybe on Madagascar. I don't recall, but it kind of washed in that direction. And so then the question was like, how the fuck did this happen? And the Medium article goes into reasons, like potential reasons, how it could have been a technical issue. Something on board went horribly wrong, and then this kind of led to the aircraft going into that weird direction. But they're all very flimsy arguments. It's essentially that they all kind of hinge on these assumptions that the air in the aircraft sent the kind of pilots loopy, and they started making horrible decisions, which just seems, incredibly unlikely. So it kind of leads to the fact that they believe it was the Captain Zaharie, who I'll kind of get into soon, was kind of the guy who orchestrated the whole thing. He planned out a route where he could kind of go undeterred when he's kind of in the populated area from where he took off, and then quickly get into kind of like quickly evade anyone that could essentially find him, and then make sure that he kind of like lands in pretty much one of the most desolate areas where he could just, sink without a trace. So that's kind of the most logical explanation at this point in time. Yeah. I read the article a few weeks ago and just skimmed it this morning. Do you have anything to add, David, in terms of like any other details that I might have missed from the kind of main nuts and bolts of the story?
Well, about the pilot, the articles I read went into his personal life, and they made comment. And one of the issues with this is almost none of it is confirmed 100%. A lot of it is speculated, and people who knew the guy was like, yeah, this was happening. But there's not that confirmation. But they were saying he was having issue with his wife, and either he moved out or she moved out and took the kids. And then he was also having issues with another woman who left him a voicemail the day of the flight. And almost all the articles bring up the fact that he had a flight simulator. I don't necessarily see that as odd. I mean, if there's any pilots listening, please tell us, is it common for pilots to have flight simulators? I think what they're trying to insinuate was he was practicing for what he was going to do. But that in and of itself doesn't seem conclusive that, oh, this guy's clearly a maniac who was planning to bring down the plane. He had a flight simulator. I don't know. A flight simulator seems like something a pilot might have.
Yeah, well, let me just, because the kind of going into what I think would be the kind of like film. There's there's the relationship here, and the Medium article goes into, there's two guys in the cockpit. There's Captain Zaharie, who's kind of like a quintessential Malaysian boomer, who he's like recently separated, got like I think a young adult daughter, and been a pilot for years, and secretly depressed, and he apparently was a huge fan of this right-wing Malaysian politician who coincidentally went to jail for sodomy the day it was like on the day of him deciding to do this. So
based.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty hardcore move. But anyway, let me just give a bit of flavor about this Captain Zaharie guy. Well, but anyway, sorry, I forgot to mention, First Officer Farouk was the other guy, and he's kind of like the young hotshot, like this guy who's just started his career. And like, I think it was maybe his second flight or something like that. He was just getting started, this poor fucker.
Unlucky.
Yeah, and he just managed to get onto a flight with this homicidal boomer. But anyway, a little bit of more flavor about Captain Zaharie. Because initially they were saying, like, as it says here, investigations seemingly came up short. The Malaysian accident report published in 2018 described him as a flawless pilot with no problems in his personal life and no obvious motivation to make a plane full of people disappear. But what was really the whole truth? In fact, evidence shows Zaharie to be a much more complicated person than Malaysian authorities portrayed him to be. The most widely reported piece of evidence tying Zaharie to the disappearance was a course he had chartered on his home flight simulator about a month before the crash. Zaharie had a number of hobbies, including paragliding and flying model airplanes, but he also spent a lot of time at home on his computer playing flight simulator games. He sometimes uploaded videos of himself playing on his YouTube channel, where he comes off as affable and knowledgeable, if a bit socially awkward. Here we go. Zaharie's social life was not as smooth as Malaysian authorities portrayed it to be. A combination of the leaked police report and interviews with people who knew him revealed he had separated from his wife on an informal basis and was living alone in the family home. He had apparently been feeling lonely and sad for a long time before the disappearance. He admitted to friends that he sometimes spent his time off pacing around empty rooms waiting for his next flight. Others said he seemed to be suffering from clinical depression. he had been obsessively stalking a pair of young models on social media. He was said to have slept. Yeah, we're all doing that, mate. Come on, buddy. He was said to have slept regularly with the flight attendants, and his wife allegedly knew. He was also said to have a number of mistresses.
So far, this article is making him sound really cool. I don't know what the issue is.
Yeah, no, this guy is a bit of a Chad. Let's get real. Pilot Chad.
Unbelievably based.
But yeah, anyways, like you just mentioned, the woman he was having an affair with there was some WhatsApp messages exchanged with Zaharie a couple of days before the crash, but she didn't want to reveal them because citing a fear they would be misinterpreted. And yeah, just finally on this guy, on the Medium article, there's a kind of a clipping from the Daily Mail where it said Zaharie was known to leave awkward comments on the profile pages of young Malaysian models. And there's this picture of this Chad boomer pilot on the right, looking like he's just out in the town having a couple red wines, and then these two cute models to the left, separate photos. But his comment, which I assume he'd posted on their social media profile, to be honest, I don't know, because the screenshot here is completely out of context. He's just these two cute girls who are kind of posing for the camera. His comment was "just shower?" ? Which does just sound like your weird uncle posting on Facebook, where it could be harmless, and he's like, "You guys look like you've had a big day outside. You need a shower," or it's like, "Get in the shower with me. Let's have some fun." So anyway, this guy at the very least is interesting as a character, and you can certainly see why someone like this, where on the surface, kind of like Stephen Paddock, seemingly okay, just getting by, in control, but a lot bubbling underneath the surface.
And I think what's inherently terrifying about this case in particular is pilots seem so far removed from quote unquote normal people. It's one of those professions that we put on a pedestal, but I think rightfully so. You don't want an average person being a pilot, like more than someone driving a big rig or I don't know, just any other impressive profession. It's like, if you're a pilot, you have to be God level talented, and you assume that they're flawless, they're psychologically sound, that they're, quick on their feet, they're adaptable. So for someone who's seemingly this Giga Chad dude who's just banging models left and right, for him to be depressed but still allowed to fly. I mean, I'm so ignorant as to what criteria, other than knowing how to fly a plane, that airline pilots have, how often they're psychologically evaluated. I don't know if in your research you found anything along those lines.
No, I have no idea. And yeah, it's also difficult to know. It's a weird profession because, yeah, you have to go through this intense level of training and you put upon a pedestal, but then in the same breath, you are the bus drivers of the sky. like I was at the airport the other day, and I think it was because I'd been in an airport not too long before that. And so I was feeling a little like fucking George Clooney and up in the air, being like, I'm stuck here again. And, feeling kind of like a jaded traveler. But then when I was like killing time before my flight, I saw a pilot kind of like pacing towards a gate, clearly like about to jump on a flight, and he didn't seem, sometimes they've got a bit of swagger when they kind of roll through the airport, the pilots, and this guy was like a middle-aged guy, and it was just clearly like another day at the office. And I was already, because I'd been in an airport maybe a month or so before that particular flight, I was already kind of looking around at the other people in the airport with disdain and being like, flip-flops at the airport, fucking animal. And, just kind of just judging people around me. And I was like, imagine if I'd been a part of this industry for 20 or 30 years and having to enjoy the glamour and the seclusion and the privacy and the kind of authority that comes with being in the cockpit, but then in the same breath having to go to disgusting public airports and just deal with the general public. I think it's kind of ripe for someone to develop kind of like an acute sense of narcissistic personality disorder and kind of develop a disdain for society and figure out a way to kind of wreak havoc on the people that you've been serving for the last kind of 30 years and dealing with.
Well, yeah. I mean, how could there not be? And man, just thinking about airports, in January, I was flying home to California. So I was leaving Kazakhstan, and I was meant to have a 1-hour layover in Moscow. And airports are miserable. TSA is miserable, and COVID has only exacerbated things. No one wants to be there. No one wants to fucking be there. There's that disgusting guy in sandals you mentioned. I know that guy. I don't like that guy either. And, you know, boarding's never on time. And even if you're 2 hours early, you always feel rushed. You feel stressed out. But then once you're at the gate, time starts moving unreasonably slowly. And so I'm at this airport. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go home. I don't want to be in Russia. An hour is too long as far as I'm concerned. And right when I'm about to board the plane, they tell me for no reason they're not going to accept my PCR test. And that's that. They don't give me a chance to argue. They don't, let me show them any links saying, no, it's valid. It's just no PCR. So what am I supposed to do? Fuck you. It's not a problem. Go do something. And, I run to try to leave the terminal to do a rapid test. I know I'm going to miss this flight, but maybe there's one in an hour or so. And they won't let me through because I don't have my boarding pass. Turns out the prick at the gate never gave me back my boarding pass. So I go back to him. He claims he doesn't have it, says it's not his problem. I try to print one, and they're saying, well, the flight already took off. Why are we going to print you a boarding pass for a flight that already took off? Essentially running from window to window to window. It didn't matter what I did or said. They weren't going to let me on the plane, but they weren't going to let me exit the terminal either. So it was like a mini Tom Hanks situation where I was just stuck in this spot where I didn't have a valid PCR test and they wouldn't let me take a new one. So after about 30 phone calls and 5 hours of waiting, I was able to leave the terminal, only for them to have lost my luggage, which I eventually got. But It's just everything that can happen at an airport that you don't want to happen in a place you already don't want to be in happened. Eventually, the next day I got on a plane, but it got me thinking, imagine after all that, it turns out your pilot's depressed.
Yeah, that's definitely going to go into the movie. The most unlucky fucking traveler who's initially very happy to get on the flight.
Right.
So they've had a fucking ordeal and then it gets worse.
I mean, typically, someone who's traveled a lot, do you think about it, or is it just, oh, this is part of the process, getting from A to B? Or do you think about the actual act of flying and what that means and what an airplane is? Does it scare you? Do you get any anxiety from it?
Well, yeah, just to kind of address what you said about the people in the airport, when I first started traveling, I was shit happens when you travel. You boarding passes, like delays, all the stuff that you kind of recounted sound like you had a perfect storm, but everyone's run into those issues. And the first couple times that happens, you approach the staff there to be like, here's what's wrong with me. Here's what's happened to me. Help me. And there's this like sense of cold detachment where you're like, why aren't you human? Like, why aren't you empathizing with me and wanting to help me? But I've come to realize like, the Pink Floyd album, The Wall, I read or heard an interview with Roger Waters. That started because I believe he was on tour in North America. I think it was in Canada. And he spat on a fan because it was towards the end of the tour. He was exhausted and sick of tour life and fan got too close to him when he was on stage and he spat at him. And he said it was like this metaphor for like, he got everything he wanted finally, 10, 15 years of slogging it as a musician, and finally got some international notoriety, and his fans were like overwhelming him. And at that moment, he put up a wall. He was like, I can't deal with you fuckers. I need to preserve a bit of myself here. And so I see airport workers almost akin to healthcare workers or something. Like if a nurse or a doctor cared too much about every patient, they'd be emotionally bankrupt after 2 weeks. So they have to just think practically, like, what can I help you? Can I give 40%? Like 40% of me is all I can give you. I need to preserve 60% of me to keep myself afloat. So I think that's kind of all I expect from people in airports, because I try and think if I was working in their situation, I would have to do the same thing to keep myself functioning. And I do think about the implications of travel a lot more, of the danger of it. There's the drastic, terrible circumstance of fucking dying in a crash, which occurs to me occasionally, but I'm pretty good at blocking that out. But I think specifically since COVID now, I'm way more acutely aware of just the minor and medium term aggravations that come with deciding to go somewhere. And I really do kind of think to myself, like, how worth it is this trip to put myself through all this pain? Because it is kind of just aggravating, and first world problems and all that shit. But long story short, I definitely think that even in our lifetime, in the last 10, 15 years, it's getting worse. Like the hassles and the technology around every other aspect of life has accelerated and made things more convenient and easier. The airport is stuck in 2003 still, from my perspective, and it's seemingly plateaued in respect to what level of service or comfort you can expect when you go there. So yeah, I think for me, it's just I'm way more. Before I was like gung ho, like, yeah, let's go there, and I would think about arriving on the beach at the destination and being like, woohoo, I'm here, first beer. But now I'm way more like, what level of pain am I going to have to contend with to get that first beer on the beach? So
to me, the whole process up until I get to the destination is just existential terror. Like, I'm going to sound like an impatient child, but being on that plane, doesn't matter if it's 5 hours or 13 hours, it is the worst shit of all time. Sitting on that plane, there's always someone with really nasty feet sitting next to you, or a couple making out and, you know, their arms touching your arm. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know why anyone's okay with PDA, but when it's someone else, it is just the worst. And on an airplane of all things, where there is no escape, it's not like I could tell them to fuck off or I could fuck off. And this happened recently. There's a couple who had to have been in their early 40s for a good 8 hours straight, just fucking tongue in mouth the entire time. They never gave it a rest, which means I didn't get a rest, because at a certain point, the guy's rubbing his girl's arm, but it's not her arm, it's my arm. Like, fuck off.
Should have joined the Mile High Club, baby.
Hey.
Damn.
But, I mean, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but especially though, because of this Malaysian Airlines flight, I actively started thinking much more about the plane going down. And not even just like, oh, I'm going to die, that sucks, but specifically, how shit would that be if the plane goes down over the Pacific Ocean or the Indian Ocean? You managed to survive that, but now the plane's sinking and there's water coming in and you're stuck in this narrow fucking tube. And I can't think of anything more terrifying than that.
Yeah. I kind of, I'm somehow able to block that out. Maybe, yeah, because I'm kind of more in the moment. I'm way more infuriated by the clumsiness and the just kind of abject, disgusting nature of the humanity on board, that the kind of the survival or existent, you know, the drastic emergency stuff is relegated in my mind. But before we kind of talk about movie stuff, I just want to reference this other boomer who appears in the article by the name of Blaine Gibson. So I'm quoting from the article again. One independent MH370 aficionado was Blaine Gibson, an American man living a nomad lifestyle who took an interest in the unexplained. He was among the first to champion the idea that debris from the MH370 would eventually wash up somewhere and that it could be examined for clues. Blaine Gibson began scouring the coasts of several countries in Southeast Africa in search of more debris. It turned out that finding it was surprisingly easy. Over the following months, he found pieces of airplane wreckage in Madagascar and Mozambique on a regular basis. As of January 2021, some 33 pieces of wreckage found on beaches have, with varying degrees of certainty, been tied to MH370. Of these, more than 1/3 were found by Blaine Gibson. So yeah, and again, if you go check out the article, it's got a picture of Blaine where he kind of he looks like a chubby kind of Nick Nolte type of guy.
Hell, that's what I want him to look like.
Yeah, and kind of just like I just love the description of an independent MH370 aficionado. An American man living a nomad lifestyle. So
on Africa and he found it.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think that kind of getting into what type of movie I think this would make. What I would concentrate on here is I would make it kind of like a boomer versus millennial story. And I would there'd be two relationships, right? There'd be the pilot and the first officer. So Captain Zaharie and First Officer Farik, they're kind of having like their millennial boomer battle. And maybe you could do that through like before the flight, they go out for drinks together, and kind of like the young guy Farik is kind of like the Chad and like attracting girls, but like Zaharie's kind of like the jaded guy and kind of like knows what's really about to happen to this dude and kind of like could have conversations about the way the world has changed. And the young dude's like, oh, isn't it fucking great? And Zaharie's like, no, the world is shit. You missed the wave, man. And then I'd also focus on this Blaine guy where you could double that boomer and millennial relationship where you could have like, I envisage him as like a British guy, like a British millennial, like the main investigator who's been like subcontracted by the Malaysian government or Malaysia Airways to be like the main investigator, the guy in control who thinks he's kind of got it figured out. But then this Blaine, this guy thinks himself as like Indiana Jones.
Just so delusional.
So delusional, but kind of also figuring shit out as well, and maybe like positing more conspiratorial explanations. And initially the millennials like, no, this is the way the world works, and this is what we think is happening in the with our investigation, but eventually kind of getting slowly more radicalized as Blaine keeps doing like, well, God damn it, found another piece of the tail in Mozambique. Like just kind of, and so you kind of see that the millennial guy who's kind of seemingly got it all fast tracked to success, corporate, is kind of seeing the kind of method in the madness of the boomer and kind of the preempting what happens to men as they get older, even when they kind of win, they lose at the same time. So that would kind of be my focus on what kind of story to tell. And then you could obviously kind of do flashback. So there's 4 main men here, 2 boomers, 2 millennials. Do specific flashbacks to their own lives to kind of flesh out their characters. But their 2 relationships and their interactions with these 2 men would kind of be my 4 men, sorry, would be my focus if I was going to turn this into a film.
So you're given 100 million in Malaysian currency to make this movie. Who's directing it? Who's starring? Maybe if there's a writer you have in mind, any
Yeah.
specific scenes or style or tone that you see?
So yeah, I don't. There's. I would, because this is obviously such a icky topic, and would probably never get. Well, I could see a movie getting made, but it would probably really be a sanitized. But the kind of dark, existential, depressing kind of movie that I'd want to see, I'm thinking of like cancelled Boomer, Mavericks. So I've got three names here. So I'm thinking Michelle Houellebecq to write the screenplay. But his book Platform is about a middle-aged sex tourist in Thailand. All these books are basically the same, just kind of disgruntled boomer guys.
I've read a Submission, but I haven't read any of his other work.
Yeah, so Submission's perhaps kind of like one of the most the slower ones. The other ones are a bit more kind of exciting because that one's more about academia and kind of I guess French politics, but yeah, I'm thinking Michelle Houellebecq would do a good job. Yeah, because there's the kind of like the exotic Asian aspect here of being in Malaysia. I was in Singapore recently, and you see the older expats who are there, and it's kind of, I don't know, there's kind of sex in the air, but in a very kind of sleazy way. So I think that reeks of Michelle. I'd want Lars von Trier to direct this. I think if we're going to talk controversial bad boys of cinema, old mate Lars would get the nod, and I think he could kind of do a good job with the kind of and we didn't mention this before, but essentially what they think this Zaharie guy did is that he asked the co-pilot to exit he got him out of the cockpit shortly after takeoff to like run an errand, and when he was out of the cockpit, he did like this insane maneuver which he was practicing on his simulator weeks before, where he took like a hard left and descended aggressively. And I think he did that for something like 5 minutes, where the pressure would have put everyone out in the main cabin and essentially killed everyone. So I think Lars von Trier would do a good job of kind of executing those kind of more actions, obviously the kind of like the dark, depressing dialogue stuff, but then also maybe the kind of the more exciting action stuff. I think he'd do a good job too. And then the only other name here I'm thinking, just in terms to get the trio of kind of cancelled bad boys, is there's this guy called Varg Vikernes, who was in this Danish black metal band in the 90s called Burzum, I think you call it. And he killed someone as a young man, another black metal
As
dude.
you do, that's metal. I mean, come on, let's not criticize the guy.
Yeah, there's a movie made. There's a really good documentary about dark Scandinavian metal. I don't recall what that's called, but yeah, and then there was a really bad Hollywood movie about him. But anyway, he was in jail for like 15 years or something, got out, and then became like a hard, like he's basically kind of a neo-pagan, fascist Nazi figure guy who had a YouTube channel for a while and just was saying crazy shit on there. And he's developed kind of like a very kind of disturbing online following of young dudes where it's like, you're just like me, man. But anyway, he makes electronic music. And so I don't anticipate much metal, but I could imagine lots of kind of weird, atmospheric, dark electronic music flooding this flick. So yeah, they're the kind of three names, and I would like some Malaysian actors to portray the main guys. I don't want, I love it when you actually cast people from the home country, not for some woke reason, but just I think it kind of like it lends itself to more reality there. So if anyone out there knows any good Malaysian actors, feel free to fucking make some suggestions. And I don't know, for the other guy, I think Nick Nolte's a little too old to play Blaine, but someone kind of
But
of
he's
that
Nick
ilk.
Nolte, man. Like, See, I'm already in my head turning it into a farce because how old's Blaine meant to be?
In these photos here, he looks about like maybe late 50s, early 60s.
I'm just saying like 97-year-old Nick Nolte. Like I don't know, do what they
Still
did in The
going.
Irishman where they took his face and they made a 90-year-old man look 87. Do the same to Nick Nolte. Have him play.
Yeah.
I mean, that would ruin the movie though, because I think Lars von Trier is the choice. Like no one does grim and
Mhm.
existential terror better than him. I don't know if you saw one of his more recent movies, Melancholia.
I've watched like that's one of those where I watched on a plane actually. So I never got through it all because I was too tired or something, but I really enjoyed what I saw.
I mean, the ending is horrific. I mean, spoilers for I don't think that many people are gonna watch it, but the movie is this planet is on a collision course with Earth, and for 2/3 of the movie, it's just there in the background, and most of the movie is about everyone else's personal drama and bullshit.
Mhm.
Because even with impending doom, that's who people are. But at a certain point, the planet it's there, it's on the horizon, and the movie just ends with the family holding each other, and the planet fucking demolishes them. It's the most horrific thing I've ever seen. And so I think Lars von Trier is the choice. But in my mind, a part of me wants to play up like the ridiculousness of the Don Lemons of this all and the Blaines of this
Mm.
all and really play with the wacky nature of just the way the media sensationalizes things. And I was kind of thinking, do you know Armando Iannucci?
Yeah, I do. It's on the tip of my. Did he do that? It's that political show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he did The Death of Stalin, which is one of my recent favorite movies.
Oh fuck! My buddy was pitching that to me in Toronto, and I looked up the wiki. That looks. I can't believe I that passed me by. That looks fucking hilarious.
It's unbelievably funny, and then at a certain point though, just on a dime, it switches gears and becomes so fucking dark. And I know that's off-putting to a lot of people, but that's life. I mean, life isn't, oh, Tuesday's the day for funny things and Wednesday's the day for dark things. It's like, no,
Mhm.
you could be having a great time and the darkest shit happens to you, or vice versa. Like, you're at a funeral and someone farts, you're probably gonna start laughing. You know what I mean? Like, you can't shut yourself off completely as a human being to things that are inherently funny. And so in my mind, I'm seeing a lot of people walking and talking down hallways with like a lot of quick edits, but not cringy in a way that Aaron Sorkin does it. I think Armando Iannucci is a lot better at it.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good. Yeah, because I just kind of would be. I'm zeroing in uh on these relationships here between the kind of the boomer and the millennial, the Malaysian guys, and then the investigator and Blaine. But yeah, there's a bigger, I guess, the bigger picture here, and the kind of media coverage and the I don't know the way that kind of like we report on things and they're the most important thing ever and you're encouraged to pay attention to, yet the next day a bigger story happens and it's dropped. And so if you're, I don't know, when you think about kind of generational shifts or culture shifts, it's it's hard not to be nihilistic or depressed about where things are headed, because I just feel like I've got some I'm very much in the middle politically. I don't align myself left or right. I try to think about issues, but I've noticed this thing with people who are younger, who are, well, I guess my age, who are kind of aligned politically, and I just see them kind of softening with age, and how the boomers they supposedly hate, they are obviously becoming before my eyes. Like the hippies who moved to San Francisco in the 60s and were interested in free love and the Grateful Dead and dropping acid, eventually got tech jobs and got in on the ground floor for Apple, and now have fucking six mansions in Palo Alto and are hoarding their money in offshore accounts. That's the same person. And so I see the same kind of gradual shift in behaviors and the mellowing out and the kind of, I think that the kind of the war between millennials and boomers that's occurring is very one-sided because millennials control online media, and so boomers kind of don't really stand a chance in respect to being able to fight back. So it seems like a very one-sided war, but I think that also boomers kind of don't give a shit. Most boomers don't give a shit because they're like, yeah, I remember what it was like to be you, where I cared about things and hated my grandparents or my parents. But yeah, eventually you'll grow out of this and you'll become what you hate. And then you'll have people hating you and you'll know what it's like to be on the other side. So I'm very pessimistic about the future. And so, yeah, you could potentially utilize what you were expressing about the kind of media cycle and the ridiculousness of it and how you're encouraged to obsess over things, but then it's quickly dropped when a hot new, more exciting story walks in the door, could kind of play into how things don't change. We're on different technology, different haircuts, different outfits, but the same people underneath it all.
Yeah, I mean, beautifully said. I don't really have much more to add to that statement. I was just thinking, I mean, I don't know how long you see this movie being, because I could almost see it even being a mini-series, which I think miniseries kind of take away dramatic tension, but it's kind of like the compromise. It lacks in one area, but it's able to explore more. Because I was thinking you could focus on the pilots, you could focus on the investigations, you could focus on the weird conspiracy theories, the media. But I think in a movie, especially with Lars von Trier, it would really capture the dread and the terror and the human aspect that the series would.
Yeah, it's funny with a TV show, it would almost be like Lost, where every it's a plane crash. every character gets a flashback episode. But what I didn't get a chance to see, but that link you sent where it was like the radio signals on board aren't human. What's this weird spooky shit that you found about this case?
So just so it's on the table, I don't believe in any conspiracy theories, but I think they're fun. I think they're a lot of fun.
100%.
And I was looking into like weird shit. When I read the Don Lemon black hole thing, I was like, that's pretty cool. What else are people saying? And maybe the article itself was poorly written, but this dude was saying he received an SOS that apparently originated from the plane, or it had it was very convoluted. It had coordinates to the supposed crash site of the plane, and it said like, oh my god, help us, they're not human, like indicating that on board the flight were some non-human entities. And immediately people were saying, oh, aliens, because of course it is. And I think a minute after I sent you that link, I found another one that was like, yeah, this is debunked. There's nothing true about this. But I was just thinking, I wish it was, because that sounds cool. And why not? I mean, it's been a while since we've had like some really interesting alien or UFO stories. Well, no, that's not true. I guess just recently they released all that Navy footage. I don't know if you're familiar with the TikTok.
Yeah.
That's what they call it, the Tic Tac. The Tic Tac. Apparently on naval pilots are just constantly seeing these things. And I don't know, I like alien shit. It's fun. It's all, a load of crap, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah, I'm the same. I like thinking about it. And just kind of picking up that thread, it would maybe be interesting you could potentially, because Blaine in the real story seems to have been someone who was just kind of obsessed and like had the time and energy to put himself in places where he could find the wreckage. But so I have no idea what his actual character is like, but he certainly looks like the crazy dude in Independence Day, the first one, where he was like wants to go meet the aliens type of vibe. So that Randy
Finer, the Data from Star Trek?
Yeah. So you could you could potentially get, that could be an angle here where he's radicalizing the young investigator to start thinking more conspiratorial, where, there's potentially alien interference here. And that would maybe be like an interesting ambiguity where, I don't know, and maybe a cool end to that thread would be like Blaine successfully convinces this young investigator, like there's some wacky shit at play here. And the straight-laced young British investigator finally succumbs to Blaine's charms and over some whiskeys decides, tomorrow I'm going to fly to London and explain what I think really happened here. And he goes to London, he makes this pitch that, we've never seen this before. It's definitely extraterrestrials. And then his bosses are kind of like, well, we appreciate your time, but you're now fired. And so he's essentially he gets fast tracked to becoming a British version of Blaine, where he becomes like lives in a caravan and becomes a crackpot because he's been burnt by the lack of creativity in the corporate world or imagination.
I love it. And that's what I love about movies in general. Even if I don't believe in conspiracy theories, as long as the movie does a good job of believing in it, that's fine. I'm on board. I mean, one of my favorite movies is Oliver Stone's JFK. I don't know if you ever saw that one.
I've never seen that. No, I've heard a lot about it.
I love it, but there's always that guy who's like, well, that's like, none of that's real, right? It's like, oh, no shit, really? Fuck me. I guess the movie sucks then. I know it's like mostly horseshit, but it's fun. It's fun watching the guy put the pieces together, and it's like, it turns out everyone in America besides Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK, and it's a lot of fun. And I like movies that do that. It doesn't matter if I believe that shit in real life.
Yeah, definitely. Any kind of final thoughts here? I think we basically, I'm curious about what's going to happen in years to come, whether like JFK is something I actually think about, who shot JFK all the time, because that's something where you're like, biggest story in the world. This is insane. The mob is tied to this. The Russians are tied to this. It's got something to do with the Bay of Pigs invasion. What the fuck is going on here? If we figure this out, this could help us figure out New World Order shit, like who's really running things. And so you've got kind of like a window of opportunity to kind of figure out what's happening in the immediate aftermath of an event. But then as years go by, people inevitably care less and less about it. And then the sands of time kind of it just becomes way more difficult to figure out what the fuck happened. Like my kid is really into Atlantis and Titanic and stuff like that. And he was watching this really shitty documentary on Amazon about this kind of like crackpot British guy, kind of like a British Blaine, going to like Romania and finding like clues for Atlantis in the oceans somewhere over there. Maybe it was Croatia, I don't recall. And they were saying all these stones or these plates that they found at the bottom of the ocean here were actually from Egypt, and they're a few thousand years old or whatever it was. And like just all the and like the way history, the more time that passes, you just have to kind of like, you're making wild assumptions to try and piece together a story. Like even Dan Carlin, where he's doing a lot of research and he often admits on his own show, he's like, look, this is just a theory. And he throws something out there.
Sounded like him, by the way. That was good.
And it's hard not to go along with it, because if someone's good, that's why it's history, or kind of like storytelling, is at the core of it dangerous. Because if someone's good at it and they can kind of connect a few threads, we want to believe, man. Like it's hard not to kind of get wrapped up in it. But I occasionally catch myself and have to think, unless you figure out who the killer was 5 days after the murder happened, you're fucked. It's always going to be big question marks regarding everything. So there's this kind of like beautiful the longer something, the longer the timeline spans from an event happening, the more chances are that mystery will exist forever, which is kind of depressing but beautiful at the same time, I think.
It is. I mean, my philosophy is it's always good to not know everything. I mean, it's frustrating, but it's the day we know everything is the day we no longer have anything left to strive for, no longer have to think, and it would be incredibly, incredibly boring. So I'll take minor frustration over boredom any day.
100%. All right. Well, Lars, Michelle, Varg, if you're listening, this movie needs to be made, and we're open to consultation if the price is right.
Yeah, and if any pilots are listening, send us a DM. I want to talk to you guys.
Yeah, I want to talk you off the ledge if you're about to do something crazy on the next Spirit flight I take. All right, man. What we're gonna do? You still got to figure out what other episode we're gonna do, but let's call this here, and we'll do another episode on Thursday.
Yeah, and man, I don't want to beat it over the head too much, but I was just listening to Dan Carlin today. And are you familiar with the Australian campaign in New Guinea during World War II at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I probably should be more so. I think I did a bit of this in high school, but it's essentially fighting the Japanese there, right?
And what Dan Carlin touched upon, and I did further research on, was there was something like 100 cases of confirmed cannibalism on the part of the Japanese. And I was just thinking, one, New Guinea is already a fucking terrifying place. You have the elements, you have the tribes, you have man-eating crocodiles, and then you have man-eating Japanese. And I was thinking a war movie that is truly a horror movie. You know, no epic battle scenes, no like rousing speeches, just some fucking country bumpkin from the outback sent to go fight in fucking New Guinea, and his buddies are getting eaten by crocodiles and other people. And I'm like, that's a fucking movie.
Fuck yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like a winner. All right.
And I'll try to make that the last time I do World War II. But in my defense, World War II has a lot of shit to work with.
Yeah. No, there's no rules, baby. This is our trip. All right. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Cheers. When are you flying out? When are you going?
I am going. I'll just stop the recording now.